Hi, I'm Ray, and this is my 2025 December entry for my reading journal. This will be the last entry in this reading journal specifically, and I am so excited to actually have finished this project. I will be continuing with a reading journal in 2026, which I've already recorded the setup for. It's the previous video in the channel, so if you want to check that out, please do. For December, I read 6 books and did not watch any movies. Originally, this notebook was going to be a media journal, ended up being basically just a reading journal. So for 2026, I'm doing it just as a reading journal. And I'm really excited to start populating that notebook, but let's finish up this one first. First up, with my year in pixels, I actually had a really good time with this one once I changed the way I was doing it. Originally, I was doing different colors for different formats, but I just ended up just doing, if I read, I'll put down a color, and I really liked doing it like that, which is what I've incorporated into my 2026 journal. And I'm just marking down the days that I finished a book here with a little dot, which I'm also bringing up to my next journal. As for the watching in pixel year, I gave up on it in middle of April and did not come back to it. But what I did finish doing for the rest of the year was my book bingo, and I actually finished this somehow. The hardest prompt that I had was a book from 1993, which is the year I was born. And it was really hard because I honestly only had one choice, because Parable of the Sower was the only book that I had an inkling of reading from the list I could find from 1993, honestly. So I had very slim pickings, and I honestly did not have a great time with Parable of the Sower, so it was the hardest one to fulfill. But I did do a complete bingo, and I was so happy with that. As for the next page, the 52 and 52, I finished that in August. So I actually have a different shelf that I have the rest of the books that I read in the year for. For the next challenge, it was the Buzzwordathon, which I did not finish with, or events. But for the book club, I did read the last choice for December, which is Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. And the next page I have is A Year of Goober, which was such a fun challenge. We had to create a bouquet of flowers by choosing a prompt per month. And I'm doing this challenge in 2026 as well. And we are baking little sweets, cakes and breads and pastries. It's going to be really fun. For finishing up the Year of Goober, I had November and December to draw, because I didn't draw my November flower. For November, I chose a peony, which has a meaning of prosperity with the prompt of connected to wealth, which made me choose Heavenly Tyrant by Sharon J. Zhao, in which we have main characters that are emperors. So definitely connected to wealth there. The peony is not my best entry in my drawings. Honestly, I was not in a great energy day while I was recording this, so my drawings and other entries are not the best I could have done, but that's just how it is sometimes. For the drawings of all the flowers, I used my Prismacolor color pencils, and I do really like them. They're really nice. They're very soft and buttery, and honestly, I wish I had more colors, even though I have an absurd amount of Prismacolors. It's just sometimes you want like a specific shade of pink or blue or purple or whatever, and you don't have that specific shade, so it is a little bit frustrating, but that's how it goes. Now for December, I used Pair of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler to fulfill the prompt for Holly, which is Eternal Life, and the prompt is TBR Veteran. And honestly, I was being very generous calling Parable of the Sower a TBR Veteran, because I chose to read Parable of the Sower for my book bingo, I think in like February, and I only read it in December. So I feel like that qualifies as a TBR veteran, even though I have TBRs that have been on my shelves for literal years, an absurd amount of years. So very generously calling Parable of the Sower a TBR, but I feel that it does fulfill the prompt, having been on my to read for the entirety of the year and me only getting to it at the very end of December. So that's what we have. And for the holly, you can definitely tell I vaguely drew what I was looking at in the picture there. I did not have the greens for the holly, honestly, so it was a mix between a realistic and a very much not realistic holly, and that is my finished Year of Goober page. I am actually really happy with how that looks. As for my One Piece page, I didn't read anymore in December, so that's how that page finishes. My bingo for the movies I did not finish, nor did I finish my 52 movies in 52 weeks, which I thought I could have done, but I didn't, which is fine. As for my long list for 2025, I'm just putting down the 6 books I read in December. I have completely changed how I'm doing my long list for the year. I am doing book covers now, which is gonna look so pretty at the end. I am so excited with how it's already coming along. And now for my stats. First, my movie stats. I watched 34 movies in 2025. 29 of them were at home in different streaming platforms, and 5 were in the movies. So I went to the movies 5 times last year, and I watched mostly live actions. I watched 32 live actions and only 2 animations, which were K-pop Demon Hunters and Kimetsu no Yaiba, the Infinity Castle Demon Slayer movie, which was amazing. I knew it was going to be. I actually read all of Demon Slayer, so I'm actually really excited to watch all the movies coming out. It's so good. It's just so good. And then I ended up with an average rating of 3.9 in movies, with 1 being a 5-star, and that was Gravity by Afonso Cuarón. Now for the books. I read 6 books in December, which brought my total to a whopping 74 books this year. Absolutely insane. By far the most I've read in a year, no questions asked. And the thing is, I've always been a really big reader. It's just that I always read also a lot of fan fiction. So my number of books, I don't think ever surpassed 50 before. So having gotten to 74, it's absolutely insane. Out of the 74, 11 were physical books, 37 were digital books. Thank you, Libby, for your service. 16 were audiobooks, also thanks to Libby. 7 were mangas, aka 7 One Piece omnibuses, or 21 volumes of One Piece. 7 graphic novels for an average rating of 3.63, and a 1 5-star, which was just Viola Davis's Finding Me biography, which was amazing. And that is my stats for 2025. Passing the checkout page and my series tracker, nothing to add from December. I do have things to add in my alphabet challenge. I read Cat's People by Tanya Guerrero. It's really good. C somehow ended up being a very hard letter for me to fulfill. I ended up not fulfilling K, L, Q, U, V, X, and Z. So a good outing for a challenge that I wasn't completely trying to fulfill. Now for my year in Aldea, I only really started this challenge in July, so anything up to June I just kind of chose from the group of books I had already read by that point. But this was a really fun challenge to participate, and I did finish it. I got to read for November, I read Tiny Challenges for nonfiction. And for December, I read Mate by Ali Hazelwood for an ancient tree blessing, or tree in the cover. So I ended up on the 12A section of the map. I was really happy with that. Moving on to my second shelf, because I ran out of space on my first one and I finished the challenge of 52 books in 52 weeks, way ahead of schedule. I am just adding the last book here, number 74, which was A Diary in Blood by St. Gibson, or St. Gibson. I'm not sure how she wants her name to be read. I don't know. I should have looked into that. Anyway, I filled most of this up before, because what happened was I recorded a part of this a while ago, and then I lost the footage, because of course I did. So I actually don't have the footage of me making this cover, which is my December cover that I decided to draw out completely and have the covers in the middle of the drawing. I do really like the way this turned out. I just went ham with my Pigma microns and a couple of Tombow brushes, basically. I do wish I had a red Tombow brush, but I don't. So I ended up using this copper Posca that I have. Unfortunately, the shininess of the copper doesn't really come through in this paper, but the intention was there. Anyway, so here are the 6 covers for the books I read in December. I read Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg, Cat's People by Tonya Guerrero, Mate by Ali Hazelwood, Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler, Quarto de Despejo by Carolina Maria de Jesus, and lastly, A Diary in Blood by Saint Gibson. I'll call her Saint Gibson, I think that makes sense. Now, as I said before, I did lose some of my footage, so you'll see that I actually have the collage done when I flip the page now. You see that I do have the collage done for Tiny Habits and Cat's People, but these were very simple collages. I just used some of the paper I had in my stash. For Tiny Habits, I went with a lime green paper to match the font in the book cover. And this book, I think it's good for people that are looking for this type of advice. It gives really interesting, a really interesting view on how to create habits and maintain habits. It is a bit too long though, like 100 pages too long. It definitely comes across that it started out as sort of a workshop situation, so it does feel a bit bloated for what it is. If it was a bit shorter, I think I would have enjoyed this a bit more, but I did enjoy parts of it, especially the beginning when it first presents you with the idea of a tiny habit. I think that is really a really important view of how to start to create a habit, and I have tried to implement a couple of the things I learned in this book. I ended up with a 3.5 star, which I think is really fair for it. Now, for Cat's People, completely different. This is a very cozy fiction with like a little bit of magical realism because the cat has its own POV and ideation and everything, and Cat is perfect. He is a precious baby and I will protect him with my life. So this book goes into the people around Cat, the black cat, and how the cat connects all these 5 people. It's a really interesting read. It's very cozy. It's very chill. It's definitely a read to do when you just want something good and nice and fun in your life. It's very much a very soft read, I want to say. To finish up the page, I just put down some of my cat stickers. I have a bunch of these. I got a little box that has too many of these little cat stickers, so I just used a couple of them. And Cat's People by Tonya Guerrero ended up having 4.5 stars in my rating system, because I have changed my rating system a little bit. I think I'll do a little video explaining how I do it, but it goes characters, atmosphere, relationship, plot, and enjoyment. And you end up with a number, and that is your number of stars. As for my next entry, it is Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. It's actually a little mistake that I made. It should have been Mate by Ali Hazelwood, but that's fine. I finished Octavia's a little bit after Mate, but that's okay. Sometimes you just kind of flip your pages. It's all right. Anyway, for the collage for that, I found this hand in my stash of collages. I have no idea where I got this from some old textbook or something. And I thought it really matched the kind of religious sewing vibe of the entire book. And I don't know, I had a really weird relationship with this book, so I don't want to talk too much about it. But overall, I kept questioning the dystopia of this book. I kept questioning the violence that it brought out of people. So I'm just like, how much violence can destroy a society while still keeping a semblance of the society that we have kind of situation. And for dystopia, it's kind of hard to really immerse yourself in the story that you're reading when you start questioning the feasibility of the dystopian reality that you're reading. And it's just, I don't know, because it kind of towed the line of a very possible dystopia and a very fantastical dystopia. And I had a really hard time getting into it. And I just really didn't like the characters, so that made it a bit harder. I did this as an audiobook and then I ignored it for a couple of days, which is why it took me over 2 weeks to read it. So I don't know. I had a weird time with this book. Ended up giving it 3.5 stars, which honestly, for how much I enjoyed it, it was a very generous rating. And that's because it's really well written. Like, the prose of it is really good, even though I didn't like the story. The prose is really good, so I had to give a couple of points for that. And yeah, that is my perception of that one. And next up was Mate by Ellie Hazelwood, which is very diametrically opposed, as it is very hard or very lighthearted, goofy fun in comparison to how harsh of a book Parable of the Sower is. So it's really funny to me that these two books are in the same spread. It's kind of hilarious, actually. Now that I think about it, these two books could not be more different. Mate is the continuation of Bride, or I guess the sequel, not really a continuation. It's a very loose sequel to Bride because it really does not touch on Bride that much. You do not have to have read Bride. It does help because you know a little bit of what's going on, although not much is going on, honestly. The plot is very flimsy in this one. Bride felt like it had a bit more plot than this one. And honestly, the one thing I want to say about this book, as a person that grew up on ABO, don't make me question your ABO, please. Like, when you get to an ABO situation, if you don't know what ABO is, I am not the one that's going to teach you. If you get to an ABO reality, like in your story, what I need to question is what your rules are, and that's it. I need to find out what the rules are, and I don't need to question what are you doing. Now, if throughout the story I am questioning the choices you made in your ABO rules, I don't know if you did a good job in your ABO, honestly. And like, the thing is, and I'll get a little bit into spoilers here, Serena goes into heat, basically, and then she proceeds to not eat. So the logic of the ABO here is that your body is getting ready to be pregnant, and you spend months basically not eating to the point that you lose significant amounts of weight. And that is your body getting ready to get pregnant. And so that just doesn't sit right in my brain. And in my heart, I got really upset that Serena was forcibly slimmed down. Like, in my heart, that doesn't sit right with me. That is something that really bothered me in this book. If I think about it too much, I will deduct points from it, so I won't think too much about it. But yeah, that was not fun to me specifically. Anyway, so yeah, that is all I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna say anything else. That is more than enough for what is going on here. Ended up having 7s all around in my rating for a final rating of 3.5 stars. It's good fun times if you don't think too hard about what's going on, because then you can get upset. I might deduct points from this, actually, now that I'm thinking about it too much. I might give it 3 stars, actually. Anyway, moving on. The next book I read was Quartos de Despejo by Carolina Maria de Jesus, or in English, Child of the Dark, The Diary of Carolina Maria de Jesus. And this was originally published in 1960, And it is, as it says, the diary of Carolina Maria de Jesus. She was a Black woman living in one of the first favelas in Brazil, one of the first favelas of São Paulo specifically, the favela of Canindé. And the book is her diaries from 57 to 58, if my memory serves me correctly. And it is haunting and heartbreaking, because you can see throughout the diary how much of her life was spent suffering trying to find food and questioning where she was going to get food from and how she was going to feed herself and her children. That was her reality, and it is heartbreaking to read that. One, because that was just her life, and two, because even though this book came out in 1960, it could easily have come out last year. It could easily have come out this year. Not because the favela de Canindé even exists anymore, because it was taken down, but because this is the reality of so many people everywhere. Not only in the favelas of Brazil, but literally everywhere there are people questioning where they're getting their next meal from. And it really made me think. Like, I read Parable of the Sower, I finished it just around the time as I was reading this one, and it really made me question the violence in that book, in Parable of the Sower, in comparison to the violence that we see here, because you could argue that the reality of a violent favela, because not every favela is violent and not every situation of these are violent, but it's an interesting combination of books, and I wish honestly that I've thought of putting those two together instead of what happened in my distribution of books in this notebook. But the reality of the violence that Carolina experienced versus the fictionized violence of Parable of the Sower. It was very interesting to me to have those two books so close together in my reading journey, because it really cemented to me what I was so bothered about Parable of the Sower, because it's such heightened violence because violence exists in a situation where rules are kind of questionable. Violence exists, but not the amount or the extremities of violence that we see in Parable of the Sower. It's more something like Quarto de Despejo, where it's the violence of the day-to-day, not necessarily an explosive violence that we see in Parable of the Sower. And the cool thing about this edition that I have is that, and this is actually a physical book that I read, is that this is a 60-year anniversary edition, so it has a couple of extra tidbits at the end of the book, not only the book itself, but it has a couple of interviews and how the book was received, both in the 60s and throughout the years into the 2020s. And I hope that the descendants of Carolina Maria de Jesus have found a better life thanks to the book that she wrote, because unfortunately she had a better life after she published it, but she wasn't embraced as a writer after she published it, and she did not have an easy life after she published it. It wasn't as harsh, but it wasn't an easy life after she published this book. Now, for the last book I read Sam Gibson's Diary of Blood, and this is actually a reimagining of the Dracula mythos. And mind you, I said mythos, not story, because it really is about who Dracula creates, so technically Dracula's wives, and how they perceive him and how they survive him. And that is not a spoiler, because in the very first page of the book, we learn that the Dracula figure has died, and who tells the story is one of his surviving wives. And I really enjoyed this. It was a really good end for the 2025 reading year. I finished this on the 30th of December, so pretty good. And Yeah, it is a really interesting story. I really liked the way Sam Gibson wrote this. I will be checking out what else she has written because I do really enjoy the way that this was written. Definitely give it a go. I don't want to say more about this book because that is getting to spoilers, and there's a lot of interest in finding out what happened in and how the wives survived Dracula or the monster, because they never name him and there is a reason for it. It's really interesting. Anyway, Quarto de Despejo got 4 stars, and Diary of Blood, my last read of the year, also got 4 stars. And that is my reading journal for December and the end of my 2025 reading journal. I had a really fun time with this project, and I can't wait to get into my 2026 journal and see what that takes me. And somehow I ended up with pages left in this journal. I have no idea how I managed that. I was counting down these pages and so nervous that I was gonna run out. Thank you so much for being here today. Bye.